Sometimes the most life-altering moments arrive disguised as ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Sometimes salvation wears the face of two frightened children hiding in shadows. Sometimes the very thing that seems impossible becomes the answer to prayers you never dared to whisper. This is the story of Marcus Chen, a man who thought he had nothing left to give, and how two abandoned souls taught him that love multiplies when it's shared, that family isn't always about blood, and that sometimes the universe places exactly what you need right where you least expect to find it. If you believe that broken hearts can heal by helping others heal, that second chances come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, and that ordinary people can become heroes simply by choosing compassion over convenience, then you're exactly where you need to be. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now settle in, take a deep breath, and let me tell you about the day Marcus Chen's world shifted on its axis, all because he chose to investigate a sound that others would have ignored. The rust-colored leaves crunched beneath Marcus Chen's work boots as he approached the Victorian house that had been slowly surrendering to time and neglect for the better part of a decade. The October wind carried the scent of wood smoke and dying autumn, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked at shadows only it could see. Marcus pulled his worn denim jacket tighter around his shoulders and checked his clipboard again, though he'd memorized the details hours ago. Demo crew scheduled for Thursday. Final walkthrough today. Another piece of Millbrook's history about to become a parking lot. At 34, Marcus had seen enough abandoned houses to know their stories without being told. Foreclosure notices. Yellow with age, windows boarded like closed eyelids, gardens choked with weeds that used to be someone's pride and joy. This one sat on Maple Street like a tired old woman waiting for permission to rest. 3 stories of peeling white paint and broken dreams, with a wraparound porch that probably once hosted summer barbecues and children's birthday parties. Marcus had been working for Hartwell Demolition for 6 months now, ever since the automotive plant closed and took 800 jobs with it. It wasn't the career he'd planned when he was studying engineering in college, back when Sarah was pregnant with Lily and the future felt as solid as concrete. But life had a way of rewriting plans in permanent ink. The divorce papers were finalized 18 months ago. Sarah had moved to Portland with her new husband, a financial advisor with steady income and a house in the suburbs. Marcus saw Lily every other weekend when he could afford the gas money for the 4-hour round trip. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, and Marcus pushed it open with a creak that echoed through empty rooms. His footsteps sounded hollow on the warped hardwood floors as he made his way through the house, checking for anything valuable that might have been overlooked by the previous crews. Sometimes people left behind furniture worth salvaging or copper pipes that could be sold for scrap. Every extra dollar mattered when your bank account lived permanently in double digits. The living room still held the ghosts of a family's life. Rectangular patches on the faded wallpaper marked where photographs had hung. A child's crayon drawing was tucked behind a loose baseboard, featuring stick figures under a yellow sun and the words, "I love you, Mommy," in purple crayon. Marcus found himself staring at it longer than necessary, thinking about Lily's latest artwork on his refrigerator, a horse that looked more like a purple dinosaur, but which he'd proclaimed a masterpiece worthy of the Louvre. The kitchen held an ancient refrigerator that wheezed and hummed despite being unplugged, and cabinets with doors that wouldn't close properly. A calendar from 3 years ago hung next to the sink, still turned to March, as if time had simply stopped flowing. In this place, Marcus made notes on his clipboard about electrical hazards and structural damage, the mundane details that would justify turning someone's former home into rubble. He was checking the basement stairs when he heard it, a soft scratching sound from somewhere above, like mice in the walls or tree branches against a window. Old houses were full of noises, but this one made him pause. It wasn't quite random enough to be wildlife, wasn't quite steady enough to be wind. Marcus stood at the bottom of the basement stairs, listening, his pen frozen halfway through writing foundation cracks, minor. The sound came again. Definitely from upstairs, possibly the second floor. Marcus climbed back to the main level and stood in the hallway, head tilted like a hunting dog catching a scent. Silence settled around him like dust. Then, so faint he almost missed it, he heard what sounded like whispering. Marcus took the stairs two at a time, his boots making more noise than he intended on the worn carpet runner. The second floor held 4 bedrooms and a bathroom with fixtures that probably hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The first bedroom was empty, except for a mattress with suspicious stains and a lamp with no shade. The second held boxes of Christmas decorations and old magazines, National Geographic issues from the 80s, stacked in neat piles as if someone had been planning to read them someday. The third bedroom door was closed. Marcus turned the handle slowly, and the door swung open to reveal a child's room frozen in time. Twin beds with matching quilts, one pink and one blue. A rocking horse in the corner with a mane that had been brushed until it shone. Toys scattered across the floor, as if their owners had just stepped out for lunch and would be back any moment. And crouched in the corner behind the rocking horse, 2 pairs of enormous eyes staring back at him with a mixture of terror and defiance. Marcus's first instinct was to step backward, to give the children space to run if they needed to. His second was to drop to one knee, making himself smaller, less threatening. His third was to say very softly, "Hey there, I'm Marcus. Are you okay?" The children couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. Twins, clearly, with the same dark hair and olive skin, the same heart-shaped faces and stubborn chins. But where one child clutched a stuffed elephant with most of its stuffing gone, the other held what looked like a pocket knife with a blade no longer than Marcus's thumb. Both were wearing clothes that had once been nice but were now dirty and too small. The boy's sneakers had holes in the toes. The girl's dress was torn at the shoulder. "We're not supposed to talk to strangers," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper, but fierce in a way that reminded Marcus of Lily when she decided something was unfair. "That's a very good rule," Marcus said, staying exactly where he was. "Your parents taught you well." The boy's grip tightened on the pocket knife, though he didn't raise it. "We don't have parents anymore." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He could see now that the children's faces were too thin, their eyes too old. They'd been taking care of themselves for who knew how long, in a house that was supposed to be empty, hiding from a world that had apparently forgotten they existed. "How long have you been here?" Marcus asked. The twins looked at each other, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, the girl said, "Since the social worker lady said we had to go to different houses, we ran away instead." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. These children had been in the foster system, separated, and had somehow found their way back to what was probably their childhood home. They'd been living here alone rather than be split apart. The protective instinct that had made him such a devoted father to Lily roared to life, and he had to force himself to move slowly. "Speak gently. What are your names?" he asked. Again, the silent conference between them. "I'm Emma," the girl said finally. "This is Ethan." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Emma and Ethan," Marcus repeated. "Those are beautiful names. I have a daughter named Lily. She's 7. Ethan lowered the pocket knife slightly. "Does she live with you?" "Sometimes," Marcus said, and the honesty of that answer seemed to ease something in the children's posture. "Her mom and I don't live together anymore, so Lily stays with me on weekends." Emma studied his face with the intensity of a child who'd learned to read adults for signs of danger. "Are you going to call the police?" Marcus considered his words carefully. These children had been through enough trauma that the sight of authority figures probably terrified them. They'd chosen homelessness and hunger over separation, which told him everything he needed to know about how much they meant to each other. "I'm not going to call anyone right now," he said. "But you two look like you could use some food and maybe a warm bath. When's the last time you ate?" Emma's facade cracked just slightly. "Yesterday. We found some crackers in the kitchen cabinet." Marcus's heart clenched. These babies had been surviving on whatever scraps they could find, probably drinking water from the bathroom tap, sleeping on the floor of their childhood bedroom while he'd been complaining about his own problems. He thought about Lily's weekend visits, how she raided his refrigerator and left crumbs on the couch and filled his small apartment with laughter and chaos. These children had been living in silence and shadow, keeping each other alive through sheer determination. "Here's what I'm thinking," Marcus said, settling more comfortably on the floor. "I was supposed to check this house for the demolition company, but that can wait. Why don't we go get some lunch, and you can tell me more about how you ended up? Here, there's a diner about 10 minutes away that makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in 3 counties. Ethan's eyes lit up despite his wariness. "Grilled cheese?" "With tomato soup," Marcus confirmed. "And chocolate milk if you want it." Emma shook her head firmly. "We can't leave. If they find us, they'll split us up again. They said we're too much trouble together." The phrase "too much trouble together" made Marcus want to find whoever had said it and explain exactly what he thought of adults who would separate bonded siblings. Instead, he kept his voice calm and reassuring. "How about this?" he said. "I'll go get the food and bring it back here. You two stay put, and I'll be back in an hour with enough lunch for all of us. Then we can figure out what comes next." The twins exchanged another of their silent conversations. Finally, Emma nodded. "But if you don't come back, we'll understand." Adults make promises they don't keep. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke something in Marcus's chest. These children had learned not to expect reliability from the adults in their lives. They'd been let down so many times that abandonment was just another fact of life, like the sun setting or rain being wet. "I'll be back," Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I promise. And I'm someone who keeps promises." He stood slowly, giving them time to tell him to stop if they changed their minds. Instead, Emma said, "Mr. Marcus, could you get us some peanut butter too? We really like peanut butter." "Anything else?" Marcus asked. Ethan whispered something to Emma, who nodded gravely. "Ethan wants to know if you could bring back some books. We've read all the ones here about 100 times." Marcus felt his throat tighten. These children, hungry and scared and abandoned, were asking for books. They'd been keeping themselves educated, keeping their minds active, even while living in conditions that would have broken most adults. "I'll bring books," he promised. "What kind do you like?" "Adventure stories," Emma said, "and books about animals. Ethan really likes the ones about dogs." Marcus nodded, memorizing their requests like they were the most important shopping list in the world. Grilled cheese, tomato soup, chocolate milk, peanut butter, and books about adventures and dogs. "Anything else?" The twins shook their heads, and Marcus could see them trying not to hope too much, trying not to believe that this stranger might actually follow through on his promises. He wanted to scoop them up and take them somewhere safe immediately. But he could see the fragile trust they were offering him, and he wouldn't break it by moving too fast. "I'll be back in an hour," he repeated. "Maybe less." He made it to his truck before the full weight of what he'd discovered hit him. 2 children, alone and abandoned, living in a house scheduled for demolition in 3 days. Children who'd rather face homelessness than separation, who'd been surviving on scraps and hope and each other's company. Children who asked for books, along with food, who'd learned to expect disappointment, but were still brave enough to hope for grilled cheese sandwiches. Marcus sat in his truck for a long moment, engine running, heat blasting against the October chill. He thought about his Own struggles, his divorce, his financial problems, the small apartment where he counted every dollar twice before spending it. He thought about Lily, safe with her mother and stepfather, never knowing what it meant to wonder where her next meal would come from. He thought about the easy choice, which would be to call Child Protective Services and let someone else handle Emma and Ethan's situation. Then he thought about Emma's fierce protectiveness of her brother, Ethan's makeshift weapon, their terrible thinness, and the way they'd asked for books. He thought about what it meant that they'd rather live in an abandoned house than be separated from each other. He thought about the kind of love that would make children choose hunger over loneliness. Marcus put the truck in drive and headed for the diner. Whatever came next, those children were going to have the best grilled cheese sandwiches in 3 counties, and they were going to know that at least one adult in the world could be counted on to keep his promises. Everything else he'd figure out one step at a time. The diner was nearly empty at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus ordered enough food for 6 people, along with extra containers of soup and packets of crackers. He bought peanut butter and jelly, a loaf of bread, a gallon of milk, and a bag of apples from the attached convenience store. At the bookstore next door, he found a collection of adventure stories and 3 different books about dogs, including one about a golden retriever who saved a family from a fire. By the time he returned to the house on Maple Street, his truck loaded with supplies, Marcus had made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. He wasn't going to call CPS today. He wasn't going to let those children spend another night hungry and afraid. He was going to figure out how to help them, really help them, even if it meant turning his own life upside down. The front door was still ajar where he'd left it. Marcus called softly up the stairs. "Emma, Ethan, it's Marcus. I brought lunch." The sound of footsteps on the stairs was cautious but swift. The twins appeared at the top of the staircase, still wary but with something new in their expressions. Hope, maybe, or just the simple anticipation of a warm meal. "You came back," Emma said, and Marcus could hear the wonder in her voice. "I told you I would," Marcus said. "And I brought everything you asked for, plus a few extras." He unpacked the food on the kitchen counter, opening containers and setting out plastic spoons, while the twins watched from the doorway. The smell of tomato soup and grilled cheese filled the kitchen, and Marcus saw Ethan's eyes go wide with hunger. "Come on," Marcus said. "Let's eat while it's still warm." They sat on the kitchen floor like a picnic, eating straight from the containers. Marcus watched the twins devour their food with the intensity of children who'd forgotten what it felt like to be full. Emma ate methodically, savoring each bite. Ethan wolfed down his sandwich and immediately started on the soup, pausing only to say, "This is the best food ever." When they'd finished eating, Marcus pulled out the books. Emma gasped when she saw the adventure collection, and Ethan actually smiled when Marcus handed him the book about the golden retriever. "These are for us to keep?" Emma asked. "They're yours," Marcus confirmed. "And Emma, Ethan, I want to ask you something important. I want to help you, really help you, but I need to understand your situation better. Can you tell me more about what happened? How did you end up here?" The twins looked at each other, and Emma nodded to her brother. Ethan cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice soft but steady. "Our mom died in a car accident 8 months ago," he said. "We lived here with her. After she died, they said we didn't have any relatives who could take care of us, so we had to go to foster homes." Emma picked up the story. "The first place was okay, but they could only keep us for a few weeks. Then they said they found us a long-term placement, but it was 2 different families. They said most people don't want to take 2 kids at once." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest again, but he kept his expression neutral. "So they were going to separate you. The social worker said it would be good for us to learn to be independent," Ethan said. "But Emma's my twin sister. We've never been apart, not even for one day. So we ran away," Emma said simply. We remembered where the spare key was hidden here, under the fake rock by the front steps. We thought maybe if we stayed here, someone would let us keep living here together. How have you been managing? Marcus asked. Food, clothes, school? Emma shrugged. We found some canned food in the pantry that wasn't expired. And we've been very careful about not letting anyone see us. We only go outside at night to get water from the garden hose or look for food. We're not dumb, Ethan added defensively. We know how to read and do math. Mom taught us lots of stuff before she died. Marcus could see the intelligence in their eyes, the resilience that had kept them alive and together despite impossible circumstances. These weren't children who needed to be managed or controlled. They were survivors who needed safety and stability and the chance to just be kids again. You're both very smart, Marcus said, and very brave, but you can't stay here. This house is scheduled to be demolished on Thursday. The twins went very still. Demolished? Emma whispered. Torn down, Marcus confirmed gently. It's not safe anymore. The foundation is cracking and there are electrical problems. Tears filled Emma's eyes and Ethan moved closer to his sister. Then we don't have anywhere to go, Emma said. They'll split us up for sure now. Marcus took a deep breath. The decision he'd been circling around all afternoon crystallized into certainty. What if they didn't have to split you up? What if there was someone who wanted to take care of both of you together? Emma's eyes widened. You mean like adoption? I mean like me, Marcus said quietly. I know we just met, and I know this is all very sudden, but I have an apartment big enough for 3 people. I have a job, and I understand what it's like to miss someone you love. My daughter Lily would be thrilled to have a big sister and big brother. The twins stared at him in stunned silence. Finally, Ethan said, You would want us? Both of us? I can't imagine wanting one of you without the other, Marcus said honestly. You're a team. That's obvious to anyone who spends 5 minutes with you. Emma's voice was very small when she asked, But what if we're too much trouble? What if you change your mind? Marcus thought about his answer carefully. These children had been disappointed by every adult they'd trusted. Their faith had been broken so many times that even kindness felt dangerous. Emma, Ethan, I can't promise that everything will be perfect, he said. I can't promise that we won't have hard days or that I'll never make mistakes. But I can promise that I will never, ever give up on you, and I will never split you up. Whatever challenges we face, we'll face them together. Ethan set down his book and looked directly at Marcus. Do you really mean that? I really mean it, Marcus said. But here's the thing. We have to do this the right way, through the proper channels. That means I need to call someone and explain what's happening. It means there will be paperwork and interviews and lots of questions. It might take time. How much time? Emma asked, fear creeping back into her voice. I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I know someone who might be able to help us figure it out. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number for Janet Morrison, a social worker he'd met during his divorce proceedings, when Sarah had questioned his fitness as a father. Janet had been fair and thorough. And more importantly, she'd seemed to genuinely care about Lily's well-being above all else. I'm going to call someone who specializes in helping families, Marcus explained. Her name is Janet, and she's good at her job. I'm going to tell her about you two and about what I want to do. But I need you to trust me for a little while longer. Can you do that? Emma reached for Ethan's hand. If we say yes, what happens next? Next, we make sure you're safe and fed and warm while we figure out the details, Marcus said. Tonight, you're coming home with me. We'll set up the couch for one of you and get an air mattress for the other. Tomorrow, we start making this official. The twins had another of their silent conversations, and Marcus waited patiently while they worked. Through whatever decision-making process they'd developed over their months of taking care of each other. Finally, Emma nodded. Okay, she said, we'll trust you. But Mr. Marcus? Just Marcus is fine." "Marcus," she said, testing the name. "If this doesn't work out, if they try to split us up anyway, we'll run away again. We'll disappear, and no one will ever find us." Marcus looked into her fierce, determined eyes and saw a child who'd already lost everything once and would do anything to keep from losing her brother too. He saw a little girl who'd been forced to become an adult too soon, who'd learned that the only person she could really count on was the boy sitting beside her. "If anyone tries to split you up," Marcus said quietly, "they'll have to go through me first, and I'm a lot bigger than I look." For the first time since he'd found them, both twins smiled. Real smiles, the kind that reached their eyes and made them look like the children they were supposed to be. "Can we really bring our books?" Ethan asked. "All of them," Marcus confirmed. "And we'll get you more. As many as you want." Emma stood up and dusted off her torn dress. "Then we better start packing." As Marcus watched the twins gather their few possessions, their movements quick and efficient like children who'd learned not to get too attached to places, he thought about the phone call he was about to make. He thought about the questions Janet would ask, the background checks and home inspections that lay ahead. He thought about his small apartment and smaller bank account, about how his life was about to become infinitely more complicated. Then he thought about Emma's fierce protectiveness and Ethan's quiet bravery. He thought about how they'd survived months of uncertainty and fear without losing their fundamental decency, their love for each other, their hunger for books and adventure. He thought about what Lily would say when she met her new siblings, how her face would light up with excitement. Marcus Chen had come to an abandoned house, expecting to find nothing more than structural damage and forgotten belongings. Instead, he'd found two children who needed exactly what he had to offer, and who offered exactly what he needed in return. He'd found a family he never knew he was looking for. As the afternoon light slanted through the dirty windows of the house on Maple Street, Marcus helped Emma and Ethan pack their small collection of treasures into a cardboard box. Their entire world fit into a space smaller than his truck's glove compartment. But somehow, as they prepared to leave the only home they remembered, they all felt like they were gaining something immeasurable. The real journey was just beginning. The drive to Marcus's apartment felt longer than usual, though it was barely 15 minutes from Maple Street to the converted warehouse district where he'd been living since the divorce. Emma and Ethan sat in the backseat of his pickup truck, their cardboard box of belongings wedged between them like a shield. Neither child spoke, but Marcus could see them in his rearview mirror, wide-eyed and alert, taking in every detail of their route as if memorizing an escape plan. Marcus's apartment was on the third floor of a building that had once housed a textile factory. The developer had converted it into affordable housing units, keeping the original brick walls and high ceilings, but adding modern amenities like central heating and actual insulation. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm, with 2 bedrooms, a decent kitchen, and windows that looked out over the river. "This is it," Marcus said as he unlocked the door, suddenly seeing his home through the eyes of 2 children who'd been living in an abandoned house. The living room held a worn but comfortable couch, a coffee table covered in Lily's weekend art projects, and a television that was older than the twins but still worked perfectly. The kitchen was small but functional, with a refrigerator covered in Lily's school photos and report cards. Emma and Ethan stood just inside the doorway, still clutching their box, looking around with the wariness of animals in unfamiliar territory. Marcus set his keys on the counter and tried to imagine what they were thinking. After months of hiding in empty rooms, his modest apartment probably felt exposed, vulnerable. "Why don't you set your box down and I'll show you around?" Marcus suggested gently. "The bathroom's down the hall, and there are clean towels if you'd like to wash up." Ethan's eyes locked onto the refrigerator. "Is that your daughter?" Marcus followed his gaze to a photo of Lily grinning gap-toothed at the camera, her hair in pigtails and her face smeared with birthday cake frosting. "That's Lily," This was taken at her 7th birthday party last month. She looks nice, Emma said quietly. Does she know about us? Not yet, Marcus admitted. I'll call her tonight and tell her she's going to have some new friends staying with us. She'd be excited. Lily loves meeting new people. The twins exchanged one of their silent conversations, and Marcus could practically see them weighing the risks and benefits of this new situation. They'd learned to be skeptical of adult promises, but they were also children who desperately needed stability and safety. The couch pulls out into a bed, Marcus explained, demonstrating the mechanism. It's pretty comfortable. I sleep on it sometimes when I'm watching late movies. And I can set up an air mattress in my room if one of you wants more privacy. We don't mind sharing, Emma said quickly. We've been sleeping together anyway. Marcus nodded, understanding that the twins found comfort in each other's presence. After everything they'd been through, being close was probably the only way they could truly rest. There's food in the kitchen, he continued. Help yourselves to anything you want. The bathroom is stocked with soap and shampoo, and there are extra blankets in the hall closet. Ethan spoke up hesitantly. What about rules? The question hit Marcus harder than it should have. Of course these children would ask about rules. They'd probably lived in foster homes where regulations governed every aspect of their lives, where breaking minor rules meant punishment or displacement. Rules, Marcus repeated, thinking carefully. Well, let's see. Be honest with me, even. If you think I won't like what you have to say, ask for help when you need it. Treat each other and me with respect. And don't go anywhere without telling me first, at least until we get this situation sorted out. Emma frowned. That's it. That's it for now, Marcus said. If we need more rules, we'll figure them out together. The simplicity of it seemed to confuse them more than strictness would have. Marcus realized that these children had probably never lived anywhere where their input mattered, where rules were collaborative rather than imposed. I need to make some phone calls, Marcus said. Important ones. About your situation. While I'm doing that, why don't you two explore a little? Get comfortable. There are books on the shelf in my room, and Lily left some art supplies in the kitchen drawer if you're interested. The twins nodded, still somewhat stunned by their new surroundings. Marcus retreated to his bedroom and closed the door, then sat on the edge of his bed and pulled out his phone. The call to Janet Morrison couldn't wait any longer. Janet answered. On the 3rd ring, Marcus, this is unexpected. How are you doing? I'm fine, but I need your help with something urgent, Marcus said. I found 2 children today, twins, living alone in an abandoned house. They're in my apartment now, and I want to know what I need to do to become their foster parent. There was a long pause. Marcus, slow down. Tell me everything. Marcus explained the situation as clearly as he could, from finding Emma and Ethan in the house on Maple Street, to their history in the foster system, to his impulsive decision to bring them home. Janet listened without interrupting, asking only occasional clarifying questions. So these children have been missing from the system for how long? She asked when he finished. I'm not sure exactly. They said they ran away before being placed. In separate homes, so maybe several weeks. And you brought them to your apartment without contacting anyone? Marcus heard the concern in her voice and felt his stomach drop. Janet, they were living on scraps and rainwater. They were terrified of being separated. I couldn't just leave them there. I understand your impulse, Marcus, and honestly, your heart was in the right place. But this is complicated. These children are wards of the state, and by not reporting their whereabouts immediately, you could be charged with harboring runaways. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on helping Emma and Ethan that he hadn't considered the legal ramifications of his actions. What do? I do? First, we need to contact the Department of Children and Family Services immediately. I'll make some calls and see who is handling their case. Then we need to discuss your interest in fostering them. Janet, they can't be separated. Whatever it takes, they need to stay together. Marcus, I hear you, but you need to understand how the system works. Emergency placements are often temporary and not ideal. The fact that these children ran away rather than accept separation suggests they have a strong trauma bond. That's not necessarily something that can or should be broken, but it does complicate placement options. Marcus ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of decisions he'd made without fully understanding their consequences. What are my chances of being approved as their foster parent? Honestly, it depends on a lot of factors. Your income, your living situation, your background check, your experience with children. The fact that you have Lily part-time is actually a positive, but your recent divorce and current financial situation might raise questions. I don't have much money, Marcus admitted, but I have enough to take care of them. And they're not asking for luxury. They're asking for someone who won't give up on them. I believe you, Marcus. And the fact that you called me instead of trying to handle this on your own shows good judgment. But we need to move fast. I'm going to make some calls tonight and see what I can find out about their case. In the meantime, document everything. Write down exactly how you found them, what they told you about their situation, what condition they were in. The more detailed your account, the better. After hanging up with Janet, Marcus sat in his quiet bedroom and tried to process what he'd learned. He'd acted on instinct, driven by the same protective urge that made him move heaven and earth for Lily. But instinct wasn't enough when dealing with a system designed to protect children through procedures and protocols. A soft knock on his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus, can we come in? Marcus opened the door to find Emma and Ethan looking scrubbed and considerably less fragile than they had that afternoon. They'd both showered, and Emma had found one of Lily's oversized t-shirts to wear over her dress. Ethan was wearing his same clothes, but they were cleaner now. How are you two doing? Marcus asked. Better, Emma said. The shower was really nice. We haven't had hot water in a while. Ethan held up one of Marcus's engineering textbooks. Can I ask you about this? I don't understand some of the words, but the pictures are really cool. Marcus felt his heart squeeze. Even after everything they'd been through, these children were curious, eager to learn. Of course. What specifically interests you? For the next hour, Marcus found himself explaining basic engineering principles to two remarkably bright children who absorbed information like sponges. Emma was drawn to the architectural drawings, while Ethan was fascinated by the mechanical diagrams. They asked thoughtful questions and made connections that impressed him. You two are really smart, Marcus said when they'd exhausted his collection of textbooks. Mom always said we were, Emma replied. Then her face fell slightly. She wanted us to go to college someday. You still can, Marcus said firmly. Your mom's dreams for you don't have to die just because she did. Emma looked at him with an expression far too old for her 6-year-old face. Adults always say things like that, but they don't usually mean it. I mean it, Marcus said. Emma, Ethan, I need to tell you something important. I called a social worker tonight, someone I trust. Her name is Janet, and she's going to help us figure out how to make this work legally. Both children went very still. You're giving us back, Ethan said flatly. No, Marcus said quickly. I'm trying to find a way to keep you. But there are rules about these things, legal procedures we have to follow. I can't just decide to be your guardian without going through the proper channels. Emma's eyes filled with tears. They'll split us up, they always do. Marcus knelt down so he was at their eye level. Listen to me very carefully. I made you a promise today, and I'm going to keep it. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I will not let anyone separate you. We're going to do this the right way, but we're going to do it together. What if they say no? Ethan asked. What if they say you can't take care of us? Then we'll figure out another way, Marcus said. But I don't think that's going to happen. Janet is good at her job, and she understands how important it is for you two to stay together. The twins looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, Emma wiped her eyes and nodded. Okay, we'll try to trust the system one more time. But if they try to separate us, they won't, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. I won't let them. That night, Marcus made up the pull-out couch with his best sheets and pillows. Emma and Ethan settled in together, sharing the space like they'd probably shared everything else in their short lives. Marcus left a light on in the kitchen and his bedroom door open in case they needed anything during the night. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the phone call he'd have to make to his ex-wife. Sarah needed to know about Emma and Ethan before Lily arrived for her weekend visit. He thought about his landlord, his neighbors, his job. Taking in 2 children would change everything about his carefully managed life. Around 3 in the morning, Marcus heard soft voices from the living room. He got up quietly and peered around the corner to see Emma and Ethan sitting up on the couch, whispering to each other. Think he really means it? Emma was saying. I don't know, Ethan replied. But he brought us food when he said he would. And he didn't call the police right away. He could still change his mind. Adults do that sometimes. Maybe, but he has kind eyes, like Mom did. Marcus felt his throat tighten. These children were trying so hard to hope while protecting themselves from disappointment. They'd been failed by so many adults that trust had become a luxury they couldn't afford. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Janet called early with news about Emma and Ethan's case. I spoke with their caseworker last night, she said. Her name is Patricia Hoffman, and she's been looking for these children for 3 weeks. She's relieved they're safe, and she's willing to consider your request to foster them. That sounds positive, Marcus said cautiously. It is, but there are conditions. You'll need to undergo an emergency background check, a home inspection, and an interview. Patricia wants to meet with you and the children this afternoon. Marcus's stomach clenched. What should I expect? Patricia is thorough but fair. She's primarily concerned with the children's welfare. The fact that they chose to trust you enough to leave their hiding place will work in your favor. After breakfast, Marcus sat down with Emma and Ethan to prepare them for the meeting. They listened solemnly as he explained what would happen, who Patricia Hoffman was, and what kinds of questions she might ask. Will she try to take us away today? Emma asked. I don't know, Marcus said honestly. But I'll be there with you. And I'll speak up for what's best for both of you. Ethan looked worried. What if she doesn't like us? Impossible, Marcus said firmly. You two are remarkable kids. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see that. Patricia Hoffman arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. She wore a professional but not intimidating outfit, and she spoke to Emma and Ethan directly rather than talking about them as if they weren't there. I've been very worried about you two, she said after introductions were made. Can you tell me why you decided to run away from the placement we'd arranged? Emma and Ethan sat close together on the couch, and Marcus could see them steeling themselves for an interrogation they'd probably faced before. They wanted to put us in different houses, Emma said quietly. We've never been apart. Not even for 1 day, Ethan added. We're twins. We belong together. Patricia nodded, making notes in her file. I understand that separation would be difficult, but sometimes individual placements can offer advantages. No, Emma said firmly, her voice stronger than Marcus had heard it before. We take care of each other. We're not broken. We don't need to be fixed separately. Marcus felt a surge of pride at Emma's self-advocacy. These children knew their own minds, knew their own needs. They weren't asking for anything unreasonable. Patricia looked at Marcus. Mr. Chen, what made you decide you wanted to foster these children? Marcus chose his words carefully. I found them living in conditions no child should have to endure. And I saw how much they meant to each other. They remind me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choosing to take care of people who need you. You're recently divorced, working in manual labor, living in a small apartment. Are you sure you're prepared for the financial and emotional responsibility of caring for two traumatized children? The question stung, but Marcus understood why it had to be asked. Ms. Hoffman, I may not have a lot of money, but I have something more important. I have experience being a parent. I have a stable job and a safe home. And I have the absolute commitment to never give up on Emma and Ethan, no matter what challenges we face. Patricia turned back to the twins. How do you feel about staying with Mr. Chen? Emma and Ethan looked at each other, then at Marcus. He keeps his promises, Emma said simply. And he doesn't try to convince us that being apart would be good for us. He brought us books, Ethan added. And he explained engineering stuff to us. He talks to us like we're smart. Patricia spent another hour interviewing them, touring the apartment, and reviewing Marcus's references. Finally, she closed her file and looked at all three of them. Mr. Chen, I'm going to recommend you for emergency foster placement, she said. This is temporary while we complete the full approval process, but it means Emma and Ethan can stay with you legally while we work out the details. Emma burst into tears, and Ethan wrapped his arms around his sister. Marcus felt his own eyes well up with relief and gratitude. There will be regular check-ins, Patricia continued. Court hearings, paperwork, evaluations. This is just the beginning. But I can see that these children have already begun to attach to you, and that's not something I want to disrupt unnecessarily. After Patricia left, Marcus called his supervisor at Hartwell Demolition to request a few days off. He needed time to help Emma and Ethan adjust, to complete paperwork, to prepare for the home inspection that would determine their permanent future. Family emergency, he explained, which was both true and inadequate. That evening, Marcus called Sarah to tell her about the weekend plans that would now include 2 additional children. The conversation was difficult, but shorter than he'd expected. Marcus, are you sure you know what you're doing? Sarah asked. Taking in foster children is a huge responsibility. I know exactly what I'm doing, Marcus said. And Sarah, please. Prepare Lily. She's going to have some new friends staying with us. How is she going to react to suddenly having siblings? Marcus smiled, thinking of his daughter's generous heart and irrepressible curiosity. She's going to love them. As the week progressed, Emma and Ethan began to relax into the routine of Marcus's household. They helped with cooking, did their own laundry, and continued to amaze him with their intelligence and resilience. Emma turned out to have a talent for drawing, while Ethan showed an aptitude for taking things apart and putting them back together. But the real test came Friday evening, when Lily arrived for her weekend visit. Marcus had prepared both sets of children for the meeting, but he still held his breath as Lily walked through the door and saw Emma and Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, reading. "Dad!" Lily called out, then stopped short when she noticed the twins. "Oh, hi. Lily, I'd like you to meet Emma and Ethan," Marcus said. "They're staying with us for a while. Emma, Ethan, this is my daughter Lily." The 3 children regarded each other with the wariness of animals establishing territory. Then Lily noticed the book Ethan was reading. "Is that about dogs?" she asked, moving closer. "I love dogs. We can't have one because Mom's allergic, but I know everything about them." Ethan's face lit up. "This one's about a dog who saves people. His name is Rex and he's super smart. Can I see?" Just like that, the ice was broken. Within an hour, all 3 children were sprawled on the living room floor. Lily showing Emma her art supplies, while Ethan built elaborate structures with Lily's building blocks. Marcus watched from the kitchen, marveling at how naturally they'd fallen into sibling dynamics. But the real moment came Saturday morning, When Marcus woke to find all 3 children asleep in a pile on the pull-out couch, Lily having apparently abandoned her air mattress sometime during the night to join Emma and Ethan. They looked like they belonged together, like they'd been siblings all their lives. The weekend flew by in a blur of shared meals, joint art projects, and the kind of chaos that only comes from having 3 children in a small space. When Sunday evening arrived and it was time for Lily to go back to her mother's, she threw her arms around both twins. "You'll be here next weekend, right?" she asked anxiously. Emma and Ethan looked to Marcus for confirmation. "They'll be here," he promised, hoping desperately that it was true. After Lily left, the apartment felt strangely quiet. Emma and Ethan helped Marcus clean up the weekend's accumulated mess, moving around each other with practiced efficiency. "She's really nice," Emma said as she dried dishes. "I never had a little sister before. She likes you too," Marcus said. "I can tell." That night, as Marcus tucked the twins into their makeshift bed, Ethan looked up at him with serious eyes. "Marcus, are you going to really keep us?" Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, choosing his words carefully. These children had been disappointed too many times for him to make promises he couldn't guarantee. "Ethan, Emma, I want to keep you more than anything. But there's still a lot of paperwork and legal stuff to get through. What I can promise is that I'll fight for you every step of the way. Whatever it takes, however long it takes." Emma reached for his hand. "We'll fight too. We're good at fighting for what we want." Marcus squeezed her small fingers, thinking about how much these children had already been through, how much strength they'd already shown. "We'll fight together," he said, "as a family." As the twins settled into sleep, Marcus sat in his kitchen and made a list of everything he needed to do to make their arrangement permanent. The list was long and daunting, but for the first time in months, Marcus felt like he was moving towards something instead of just trying to survive. He thought about the demolished house on Maple Street, how it had been scheduled to be torn down to make room for something new. Maybe that's what was happening to all of them. Maybe sometimes you had to clear away the broken pieces before you could build something better. Marcus looked around his small apartment, seeing it through new eyes. It wasn't much, but it was home. And now it was home to 2 remarkable children who'd chosen to trust him with their most precious possession, each other. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time since Sarah had asked for a divorce, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 3 weeks into their new living arrangement, Marcus received the phone call that made his blood run cold. It was Janet Morrison, and her voice carried a weight that immediately put him on edge. "Marcus, we need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon? And please bring Emma and Ethan with you." The formal tone was so different from their previous conversations that Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Is everything okay? Did something happen with the paperwork? It's better if we discuss this in person. Can you be here by 2 o'clock? Marcus agreed, but spent the rest of the morning pacing his apartment while Emma and Ethan worked quietly on their schoolwork at the kitchen table. He'd enrolled them in the local elementary school, and they were already showing remarkable progress despite the gaps in their education. Emma had a natural talent for writing, crafting stories about brave children who overcame impossible odds. Ethan excelled in math and science, asking questions that often stumped Marcus. "Is something wrong?" Emma asked, looking up from her notebook where she'd been sketching a family of elephants. "You keep walking back and forth." Marcus forced a smile. "Just thinking about work stuff. How's your story coming along?" "It's about a girl who finds a magic key that opens doors to different worlds," Emma said, her eyes lighting up. "In each world, she helps someone who's lost find their way home." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here was a child who'd been lost herself, creating stories about helping others find their way. "That sounds like a wonderful story. I'd love to read it when you're finished." Ethan looked up from his math worksheet. "Marcus, what's 7 times 43? Marcus paused his pacing to help Ethan work through the multiplication problem. But his mind kept returning to Janet's call. The timing felt ominous. Just as Emma and Ethan were beginning to feel secure, just as they'd started to believe this arrangement might be permanent, something was threatening to upend everything. At noon, Marcus bundled the twins into his truck and made the drive to Janet's office in the downtown government building. Emma and Ethan sat quietly in the back seat, sensing his tension even though he tried to hide it. They developed an almost supernatural ability to read adult moods, a survival skill born from months of uncertainty. Janet's office was on the fourth floor, a small space filled with case files and children's drawings taped to the walls. She greeted them with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and Marcus knew his instincts had been correct. Something was wrong. "Emma, Ethan, why don't you sit over there and look at some books while Marcus and I talk?" Janet suggested, pointing to a corner where she kept a small library of children's stories. The twins obeyed, but Marcus could see them straining to hear the conversation. They'd learned that adult discussions often determined their fate, and they weren't about to miss anything important. Janet waited until the children were settled before turning to Marcus with a grave expression. "I received a call yesterday from the Department of Children and Family Services. There's been a complaint filed against your foster placement." Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. A complaint? From who? The complaint was filed anonymously, but it raises serious concerns about your fitness as a guardian. The complainant alleges that you're financially unstable, that your apartment is too small for 3 children, and that you've been allowing Emma and Ethan to miss school. "That's ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. "They've been in school every day since they were enrolled. Their teachers can verify that. And yes, my apartment is small, but it's clean and safe and warm." Janet held up a hand. "Marcus, I believe you. But the department is required to investigate any formal complaint. Patricia Hoffman will be conducting a surprise inspection of your home sometime in the next few days." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, feeling the familiar weight of bureaucracy pressing down on him. "This is about money, isn't it? Someone thinks I can't provide for them because I'm not wealthy." "Partially," Janet admitted. "The complaint also suggests that you're using the children for financial gain, collecting foster care payments while providing substandard care." The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The monthly foster care stipend barely covered Emma and Ethan's basic needs, and he'd been supplementing it with his own money for things like books, clothes, and the school supplies they needed. The idea that anyone would think he was profiting from their situation felt like a betrayal of everything he'd tried to build. "Who would do this?" Marcus asked. "Who would want to break up our family?" Janet's expression softened. "Marcus, I need you to think carefully. Is there anyone who might have a reason to interfere with your custody of the children? An ex-spouse, a neighbor, someone who might feel you're unfit to be a parent?" Marcus's mind immediately went to Sarah, but he dismissed the thought just as quickly. Despite their divorce, Sarah wouldn't sabotage his relationship with children in need. She might question his decisions, but she wasn't vindictive. "I can't think of anyone," Marcus said honestly. "Most people don't even know about Emma and Ethan. I've kept our situation pretty private." From the corner, Emma's voice cut through their conversation. "We know who it is." Both adults turned to look at the twins, who had abandoned their books and were listening intently to every word. "Emma, what do you mean?" Janet asked gently. Emma and Ethan exchanged one of their meaningful looks before Emma spoke again. "There's a lady who lives in the apartment below Marcus. She complained to the landlord about us making noise. She said kids didn't belong in a building for working adults." Ethan nodded. "She stopped Marcus in the hallway last week and asked a lot of questions about us. She wanted to know if we were his real children and why we didn't look like him." Marcus felt a surge of anger. Mrs. Patterson from 2B had indeed confronted him about the children, making thinly veiled comments about proper families and people who take on more than they can handle. He'd assumed she was just a busybody neighbor, not someone who would actively try to sabotage their lives. She asked if we had papers, Emma continued, like we were dogs or something. She said it was suspicious that you suddenly had 2 kids when you only had one before. Janet frowned, making notes in her file. Did she ask you questions directly or just Marcus? Both, Ethan said. She cornered us by the mailboxes and asked where we came from and where our real parents were. Emma told her it wasn't any of her business. Marcus felt proud of Emma's backbone, but also concerned about how their neighbor might have interpreted the interaction. To someone looking for problems, Emma's defensiveness could be seen as evidence of coaching or fear. This gives us something to work with, Janet said. Anonymous complaints are harder to defend against than ones with a clear source and motive. But Marcus, you need to be prepared for what's coming. Patricia's inspection will be thorough, and if she finds any legitimate concerns, it could jeopardize your placement. Marcus nodded grimly. What should I expect? She'll examine every aspect of your living situation. Cleanliness, safety, adequate space and privacy for the children. She'll review your financial records, interview the children separately, and probably talk to neighbors and teachers. The neighbors, Marcus said with a sinking feeling. If Mrs. Patterson is the complainant, she's probably been talking to other people in the building. That's possible, Janet agreed. But focus on what you can control. Make sure your apartment is spotless, that you have documentation of the children's school attendance and medical care. Gather character references from people who've seen you. Interact with Emma and Ethan. As they left Janet's office, Marcus felt the weight of impending judgment pressing down on him. Emma and Ethan walked silently beside him, and he could see the fear creeping back into their expressions. Just when they'd started to believe they were safe, the specter of separation was haunting them again. That evening, Marcus threw himself into preparing for the inspection with the intensity of a man fighting for his life. He deep cleaned every surface of the apartment, organized closets and cabinets, and documented every expense he'd made on behalf of the children. Emma and Ethan helped without being asked, understanding instinctively that their future depended on presenting the perfect picture of domestic stability. Marcus, Emma said as she carefully arranged her schoolbooks on the kitchen table. What happens if they decide you can't keep us? Marcus paused in his scrubbing of the bathroom tiles. The question he'd been dreading hung in the air between them, demanding an honest answer. I don't know, he admitted. But I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. Even if it means fighting in court? Ethan asked. Marcus looked at both children, seeing the hope and fear warring in their eyes. Even if it means fighting in court. Even if it means selling everything I own to pay for lawyers. Even if it means moving to a bigger apartment that I can't afford. Whatever it takes. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety and preparation. Marcus took time off work to be home when the inspection happened, not wanting to leave Emma and Ethan alone to face questions without his support. The children attended school as usual, but he could see the stress affecting them. Emma's stories became darker, featuring children who were torn away from the families who loved them. Ethan had trouble concentrating on his math, asking the same questions repeatedly as if his mind was elsewhere. The knock came on Thursday afternoon, sharp and official. Marcus opened the door to find Patricia Hoffman accompanied by another social worker he didn't recognize, a younger woman with a clipboard and a camera. Mr. Chen, Patricia said formally. This is Amanda Mills from our office. We're here to conduct the scheduled inspection. Marcus stepped aside to let them enter, his heart pounding. Emma and Ethan were at the kitchen table, supposedly working on homework, but clearly alert to every movement in the apartment. For the next 2 hours, Patricia and Amanda examined every inch of Marcus's home with the thoroughness of crime scene investigators. They measured rooms, photographed living spaces, and checked the contents of the refrigerator and medicine cabinet. They noted the cleanliness of the bathroom, the adequacy of the children's sleeping arrangements, and the safety features around windows and electrical outlets. "The apartment is certainly clean," Amanda noted, writing on her clipboard. "But it's quite small for 3 people." "The children share a room at my place," Marcus said defensively. "Lily has her own room at her mother's house." Patricia nodded, making her own notes. "How do Emma and Ethan feel about the sleeping arrangements?" "We don't mind sharing," Emma spoke up from the kitchen. "We like being close to each other." "And you feel safe here?" Amanda asked, directing the question to both twins. Ethan looked up from his math homework. "This is the safest place we've ever lived." The social workers conducted separate interviews with each child, taking them into Marcus's bedroom for privacy while he waited anxiously in the kitchen. He could hear muffled voices but couldn't make out the words, and the uncertainty was agonizing. When they finished, Patricia and Amanda huddled in the living room, comparing notes and speaking in whispers. Marcus strained to hear their conversation, catching fragments about adequate care and emotional attachment and financial concerns. Finally, Patricia approached him with an expression that revealed nothing. "Mr. Chen will be filing our report within the next week. You should expect to hear from the department soon." After they left, Marcus sank onto the couch, emotionally drained. Emma and Ethan flanked him on either side, and he could feel their need for reassurance. "How do you think it went?" Emma asked quietly. "I think we showed them that we're a real family," Marcus said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. "You two were perfect." But privately, Marcus was worried. He'd seen the way Amanda had measured the apartment, noting the lack of a separate bedroom for the children. He'd noticed Patricia's questions about his income and work schedule. The inspection had been professional but cold, focused on regulations and requirements rather than the emotional bonds that had formed between him and the twins. The waiting was the worst part. For 5 days, Marcus jumped every time the phone rang, checked his mail obsessively, and found himself unable to concentrate on anything except the decision that would determine their future. Emma and Ethan tried to maintain their normal routines, but he could see the strain affecting them too. They clung closer to him, as if physical proximity could somehow guarantee they wouldn't be separated. On Tuesday morning, Marcus was replacing a broken faucet in his bathroom when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Janet Morrison's number, and his hands were shaking as he answered. "Marcus, I just received Patricia's report," Janet said without preamble. "Can you come to my office immediately?" The tone in her voice told Marcus everything he needed to know. His stomach dropped as he processed the implications. "Is it bad? We need to discuss this in person. How soon can you be here?" Marcus looked at Emma and Ethan, who were watching him with growing alarm. "Give me an hour." The drive to Janet's office felt like a funeral procession. Emma and Ethan sat in stony silence, and Marcus could see them preparing themselves for the worst. They'd been through this before, had their hopes raised only to have them crushed by adult decisions they couldn't influence or understand. Janet's expression was grim when they arrived. She waited until the children were settled with books before turning to Marcus with news that felt like a physical blow. "The department is recommending that Emma and Ethan be removed from your care," she said without softening the impact. "Patricia's report cites several concerns, primarily around your financial stability and the adequacy of your living space." Marcus felt the room spin around him. "But they're thriving here. They're happy, they're doing well in school, they're part of our family." "The department acknowledges that the children appear to be well cared for emotionally," Janet continued. "But they're concerned about long-term sustainability. Your income barely covers your current expenses, and adding 2 children creates a financial burden they believe is unsustainable." "Money isn't everything," Marcus said desperately. "These children need love and stability, not wealth." "I agree with you," Janet said quietly. But the system is designed to minimize risk, and your situation is seen as financially risky. From the corner, Emma's voice cut through their conversation like a knife. When do we have to leave? Both adults turned to see the twins watching them with expressions of devastated acceptance. They'd heard enough adult conversations to understand the coded language of social services, to know when their world was about to be shattered again. The department wants to place you in a group home temporarily while they search for a more permanent solution, Janet explained gently. It's a nice facility, and you'd be able to stay together. For how long? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Janet admitted. It depends on finding a family willing to take both of you. Emma stood up abruptly, her small fists clenched at her sides. We don't want another family. We want Marcus. We want Lily. We want to stay here. Marcus felt his heart breaking as he watched Emma's composure finally crack. These children had endured so much, had fought so hard to stay together, and now they were being punished for his financial limitations. There has to be something we can do, Marcus said. Can I appeal the decision? Get a lawyer? Find a bigger apartment? Janet looked at her notes, then back at Marcus. You have the right to request a hearing before a family court judge. But, Marcus, I have to be honest with you. Unless your circumstances change dramatically, the outcome is likely to be the same. What kind of changes? Marcus asked, grasping for any possibility. A significant increase in income, a larger living space, documented financial stability. The department wants to see that you can provide for 3 children without assistance. Marcus ran the numbers in his head. Even if he worked overtime, every week, even if he took a second job, his income from demolition work would never be enough to satisfy the department's requirements. He'd need a career change, more education, a complete transformation of his financial situation. How much time do I have? He asked. The department wants to place Emma and Ethan in the group home by the end of the week, Janet said. But if you file for a hearing, that could delay the placement by several weeks. Marcus looked at the twins, who were holding hands and watching him with a mixture of hope and resignation. They'd been through this process before, had seen adults make promises they couldn't keep. But they were still children, still willing to believe that someone might fight for them. File for the hearing, Marcus said firmly. Buy me whatever time you can. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, making lists and calculations. On one side, he wrote down his current expenses and income. On the other, he listed the changes he would need to make to satisfy the department's requirements. The gap between the 2 columns felt insurmountable. Emma and Ethan worked quietly on their homework, but Marcus could see them watching him out of the corners of their eyes. They understood that their future was being decided by numbers on a page, by bureaucratic requirements that had nothing to do with love or family bonds. Marcus, Emma said softly, it's okay if you can't keep us. We understand. The quiet acceptance in her voice was more devastating than any tantrum could have been. These children had learned not to expect too much from life, not to hope for more than temporary safety. No, Marcus said firmly, looking up from his calculations. It's not okay. None of this is okay. You 2 deserve better than a system that treats you like problems to be solved instead of children who need families. Ethan set down his pencil and looked directly at Marcus. But you tried. That's more than most people do. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. These remarkable children were trying to comfort him, to absolve him of his failure to protect them. They'd been disappointed by so many adults that they automatically took responsibility for their own rejection. I haven't given up yet, Marcus said. We still have time to figure this out. But privately, Marcus was beginning to understand the magnitude of the challenge ahead. The system that was supposed to protect Emma and Ethan was instead tearing them away from the first stable home they'd known in months. And unless he could find a way to dramatically change his circumstances in a matter of weeks, he would have to watch them disappear into a bureaucratic maze that cared more about regulations than relationships. That night, after the twins had fallen asleep on their pull-out couch, Marcus stood at his kitchen window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were answers, possibilities he hadn't considered, resources he hadn't discovered. He just had to find them before time ran out. The thought of Emma and Ethan being taken away felt like losing Lily all over again, except this time it would be his fault. This time, he would have failed them when they needed him most. But Marcus Chen was not a man who gave up easily, and he wasn't about to start now. He pulled out his phone and began making calls, starting with everyone he'd ever known who might have connections, ideas, or resources. If the system wanted to see dramatic changes in his circumstances, then he would find a way to make those changes happen. The battle for his family was just beginning. Marcus's phone calls that night yielded unexpected results. His former Army buddy Rodriguez, now working construction in Denver, couldn't offer much except moral support. His brother in Phoenix was sympathetic, but dealing with his own financial struggles. But when Marcus called his old supervisor from the automotive plant, Tom Bradley, he received news that changed everything. "Marcus, you've got timing," Tom said. "I just started working for Morrison Engineering downtown. They're expanding fast, looking for people with your background. The pay is almost double what you were making at the plant, and they provide relocation assistance for new hires." Marcus felt his heart jump. "Are you serious? What kind of work?" "Project management mostly. They're building renewable energy facilities across the state. They need people who understand both the technical and practical sides of construction. Your military engineering background, plus your hands-on experience, would make you a perfect fit." Marcus scribbled notes as Tom talked, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "What would I need to do?" "Come in Monday morning for an interview. I already mentioned you to my boss, showed him your resume from the plant files. He's interested, Marcus. Really interested." After hanging up, Marcus sat staring at his notes in disbelief. A job that paid twice his current salary would solve most of his financial problems overnight. But could he actually get it? And more importantly, would it be enough to convince the department that he could provide for Emma and Ethan? He was still processing the possibility when his phone rang again. This time it was his ex-wife Sarah calling later than usual. "Marcus, I heard about what's happening with the children," she said without preamble. "Lily told me they might have to leave." Marcus rubbed his forehead, wondering how much his 7-year-old daughter understood about the situation. "Sarah, I know this is complicated, and I know you probably think I'm in over my head." "Actually, I think you're doing something incredible," Sarah interrupted. "And I want to help." The offer stunned Marcus into silence. Despite their divorce, Sarah had always been fundamentally decent, but he hadn't expected her to involve herself in his custody battle. "I've been thinking about this since Lily told me about Emma and Ethan," Sarah continued. "She talks about them constantly, Marcus. They're already her siblings in her mind. And if there's anything I can do to help keep them together, I want to do it." "What did you have in mind?" Marcus asked cautiously. "Character references for one thing. I may be your ex-wife, but I know what kind of father you are. I'll testify at any hearing they want. And Marcus, if you need help with expenses or housing, David and I have been talking. We could co-sign a lease on a bigger apartment, help with the security deposit." Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. David was Sarah's new husband, a man who'd always been cordial but distant. The idea that he would involve himself in Marcus's problems was overwhelming. Why would David do that? Marcus asked. "Because he sees how happy Lily is when she talks about her new siblings. And because he's a good man who understands that some things matter more than money." After Sarah hung up, Marcus sat in his quiet kitchen trying to process the evening's revelations. In the span of 2 hours, he'd gone from despair to hope, from feeling completely alone to realizing he had more support than he'd ever imagined. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus researched Morrison Engineering extensively, reading about their projects and studying their corporate culture. He borrowed a suit from his neighbor's husband, practiced answering interview questions, and tried to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Emma and Ethan seemed to sense that something important was happening, but Marcus didn't want to raise their hopes prematurely. They'd been disappointed too many times to risk another setback. Instead, he focused on normal weekend activities, taking them to the library and helping Lily teach them how to play her favorite board games. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Marcus's nervous energy. He dropped Emma and Ethan at school with careful instructions to go straight to the after-school program, then drove downtown to the gleaming office building that housed Morrison Engineering. The lobby was all glass and steel, populated by people in expensive suits carrying leather briefcases. Marcus felt underdressed despite his borrowed clothes, but he pushed down his insecurity and took the elevator to the 15th floor. Morrison Engineering's offices were impressive but not ostentatious, with large windows overlooking the river and walls covered with photographs of wind farms and solar installations. The receptionist directed him to a conference room where Tom Bradley was waiting with 2 other men. "Marcus." Tom stood and shook his hand warmly. "Thanks for coming. I'd like you to meet James Morrison, our founder, and Kevin Walsh, our operations manager." James Morrison was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 40, with the kind of energy that suggested he'd built his company through sheer force of will. Kevin Walsh looked more like the engineers Marcus had worked with in the Army, practical and direct. "Tom's told us a lot about you," Morrison said as they sat down. "Your background is exactly what we're looking for. Military engineering, hands-on, construction experience, project management. How familiar are you with renewable energy systems?" Marcus answered honestly about his limited experience, but emphasized his ability to learn quickly and adapt to new technologies. The conversation flowed naturally, covering everything from his time in Afghanistan to his work at the automotive plant. "The position we're discussing would involve traveling to project sites across the region," Walsh explained. "You'd be overseeing construction teams, ensuring quality control, managing timelines. It's demanding work, but the compensation reflects that." When they mentioned the salary figure, Marcus had to work to keep his expression neutral. It was exactly what Tom had promised, enough to transform his financial situation overnight. "There is one thing," Morrison said, studying Marcus's resume. "This gap in your employment history. You've been working demolition for the past 6 months. That seems like a step backward from your previous experience." Marcus had prepared for this question, but it still felt vulnerable to answer. "I went through a divorce last year. I needed flexible work that would allow me to spend time with my daughter. Demolition wasn't my career goal, just a bridge to something better." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "And now you're ready for something more demanding?" "I am," Marcus said firmly. "I've recently become the foster parent of 2 children, and I need a career that can provide stability for all 3 of them." The mention of foster care seemed to surprise the interviewers, but Morrison's expression shifted to one of respect. "That's a significant responsibility. Most people in your situation would be looking for less demanding work, not more." "These children have been through enough instability," Marcus said. "They need to know that I can provide for them long term, not just scrape by month to month." The interview continued for another hour, covering technical questions and hypothetical scenarios. Marcus found himself relaxing as they talked, remembering how much he'd enjoyed the problem-solving aspects of engineering work. Finally, Morrison stood and extended his hand. "Marcus, we'd like to offer you the position. Tom was right about you being exactly what we need. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief, but he managed to maintain his composure. "I'm honored. When would you need me to start?" "2 weeks from today. That should give you time to wrap up your current job and handle any personal arrangements. Kevin will go over the details with you, including the relocation package." As Marcus left the building with an employment contract in his hand, he felt like he was walking on air. The job would solve his financial problems and provide the kind of career stability that would impress any social worker. But more than that, it represented hope for the future he wanted to build with Emma, Ethan, and Lily. His next stop was Janet Morrison's office, where he laid out his new circumstances with barely contained excitement. "This changes everything," Janet said, reviewing the employment contract. "The salary is more than adequate and the company's reputation is excellent. But Marcus, you'll need housing to go with the job." "I'm working on that," Marcus said. "Sarah and David have offered to help with a down payment on a house. Something with enough bedrooms for all 3 children." Janet raised an eyebrow. "Your ex-wife is helping you buy a house?" "She wants what's best for the children," Marcus said simply. "All of them, including Lily." That afternoon, Marcus picked up Emma and Ethan from school and took them to look at houses in the neighborhoods near Morrison Engineering. He didn't tell them about the job yet, not wanting to raise their hopes before everything was finalized, but he could see their curiosity about the sudden interest in real estate. "This one has 4 bedrooms, the realtor explained as they toured. "A colonial-style house with a big backyard. Perfect for a growing family." Emma wandered through the rooms with wonder, running her hands along the walls as if she couldn't quite believe they were real. Ethan was drawn to the basement, which had been converted into a workshop space. "Could I build things down here?" he asked Marcus quietly. "If this becomes our house, you can build whatever you want," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice casual despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. That evening, Marcus finally sat the twins down to explain what was happening. He told them about the job offer, about Sarah's support, about the possibility of buying a house where they could all live together permanently. Emma listened with the kind of careful attention she gave to adults when their decisions would affect her life. When Marcus finished explaining, she was quiet for a long moment. "Is this real?" she asked finally. "Or is this one of those things where something goes wrong at the last minute?" The question broke Marcus's heart. These children had learned to be skeptical of good news, to protect themselves from disappointment by expecting the worst. "It's real," Marcus said firmly. "The job is real, the house is real, and our family is real. Nothing is going to change that." Ethan looked up from the engineering textbook he'd been reading. "Will we still have to go to court?" "Yes," Marcus said honestly, "but now we have a much stronger case. When the judge sees that I have a good job and a proper house, it'll be harder for anyone to argue that I can't provide for you." The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, giving Marcus just enough time to finalize the job transition and put an offer on the house. The week passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, phone calls, and preparations. Marcus gave his notice at Hartwell Demolition, with his supervisor expressing genuine regret at losing him. "You're a good worker, Chen. If this new thing doesn't work out, you've got a job here anytime." The house purchase moved forward with surprising speed, helped by Sarah and David's financial backing and Morrison Engineering's employment verification. By Thursday evening, Marcus had signed a mortgage agreement and received keys to a 4-bedroom house with a big kitchen, a fenced backyard, and enough space for Emma and Ethan to each have their own room if they wanted. "We can still share," Emma said when Marcus showed them the house that would soon be theirs. "We're used to it." "You can share or have separate rooms, whatever makes you most comfortable," Marcus said. "This is your home. You get to decide how to live in it." The court hearing took place in a sterile government building downtown, in a room that felt more like a business meeting than a place where families were torn apart or put back together. Marcus wore his best suit and carried a folder full of documentation, his employment contract, the mortgage paperwork, character references from Sarah, Tom Bradley, and even Patricia Hoffman, who had revised her opinion after seeing his changed circumstances. Emma and Ethan sat beside him in their best clothes, which Marcus had bought just for the occasion. They looked small and vulnerable in the adult environment, but they held themselves with dignity. Judge Rebecca Thompson was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. She reviewed the case file carefully before addressing the room. "This is an unusual situation," she began. "Mr. Chen, when you first took custody of Emma and Ethan, your financial circumstances were challenging. The department recommended removal based primarily on concerns about your ability to provide adequate long-term care." Marcus's throat felt dry, but he managed to speak clearly. "Yes, Your Honor. My circumstances have changed significantly since then. So I see." Judge Thompson held up his employment contract. "Morrison Engineering has an excellent reputation. This position represents a substantial improvement in your financial stability." The judge then turned to Emma and Ethan. "Children, I'd like to hear from you directly. How do you feel about living with Mr. Chen?" Emma spoke first, her voice clear and strong. "Marcus is the first adult who's ever kept his promises to us. He said he'd never let us be separated, and he hasn't. He said he'd fight for us, and he has." Ethan nodded earnestly. "He teaches us things and listens to our ideas. He makes us feel like we matter. And if I allow you to stay with Mr. Chen permanently, do you understand that this would mean you'd be part of his family? That you'd have responsibilities as well as rights?" Both children nodded solemnly. "We want to be part of his family," Emma said. "We want to be Lily's real siblings, not just her weekend friends." Judge Thompson spent several more minutes reviewing the documentation and asking questions about the living arrangements, school districts, and support systems. Finally, she set her papers aside and looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, the transformation in your circumstances is remarkable. More importantly, it's clear that your commitment to these children goes far beyond financial obligation. You've demonstrated that you're willing to restructure your entire life to provide them with stability and love." Marcus felt his heart pounding as he waited for the verdict. "I'm granting permanent custody of Emma and Ethan Chen to Marcus Chen, with the recommendation that adoption proceedings begin immediately." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, but this time it was the impact of overwhelming relief and joy. Emma burst into tears, and Ethan threw his arms around Marcus's waist. For a moment, the formal courtroom dissolved into a celebration of family bonds that had been tested but never broken. As they left the courthouse, Marcus carried the official papers that made Emma and Ethan legally his children. The afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in months, and the future stretched ahead of them like a road leading home. "Can we call Lily and tell her?" Emma asked as they walked to the car. "Can we go see our new house again?" Ethan added. "We can do both," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "We can do whatever we want. We're a family now, officially. And forever." That evening, the three of them sat in their new living room, surrounded by boxes and the chaos of moving. Marcus watched Emma and Ethan explore their new home with wonder and growing confidence, claiming spaces and planning how they'd arrange their belongings. For the first time since finding them in that abandoned house, Marcus allowed himself to believe that they'd really made it. The system that had threatened to tear them apart had ultimately recognized what he'd known from the beginning: that family wasn't about blood or money or perfect circumstances. It was about showing up for each other, day after day, through whatever challenges life presented. Emma curled up beside him on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder. "Marcus, thank you for not giving up on us." "Thank you for not giving up on me," Marcus replied. thinking about how these remarkable children had changed his life in ways he was still discovering. Ethan looked up from the engineering magazine he was reading. "When do we get to start calling you Dad?" The question caught Marcus off guard, and he felt tears threatening again. "Whenever you're ready, but only if you want to." "We're ready," Emma said firmly. "We've been ready for a while." As Marcus looked around their new home, filled with the sounds of children who were finally truly safe, he realized that finding Emma and Ethan in that abandoned house hadn't just saved them. It had saved him too, giving him a purpose and a family he never could have imagined. The real adventure was just beginning, but for the first time in years, Marcus Chen felt ready for whatever came next. 2 years later, Marcus stood in the backyard of their home, watching Emma demonstrate her latest artistic creation to a small gathering of neighbors. She'd painted a mural on the garden shed depicting a family of different colored birds building a nest together, each contributing something unique to the construction. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone who knew their story. "The blue jay brings the strong twigs," Emma explained to Mrs. Henderson from next door, pointing to each bird in turn. "The cardinal finds the soft materials for lining. The robin knows exactly where to place everything for the best shelter." They're all different, but they work together because they belong to each other. Marcus smiled as he flipped burgers on the grill, surrounded by the controlled chaos of their first neighborhood barbecue. Ethan was in the corner of the yard, with Lily and 2 other kids from the street, explaining the mechanics of the elaborate treehouse he designed and built with help from his father. The structure was an engineering marvel for an 8-year-old, complete with a pulley system for hauling supplies and a rain collection system he'd insisted was essential for emergency preparedness. "You're going to have an architect on your hands," observed David, Sarah's husband, as he watched Ethan demonstrate the treehouse's features. "That kid sees spatial relationships like nobody I've ever met." Sarah nodded, bouncing their 6-month-old son on her hip. "Lily talks about her siblings constantly at school. Her teacher says she's developed this incredible sense of responsibility since Emma and Ethan joined the family." Marcus glanced over at his daughter, who was patiently teaching a younger neighbor how to climb safely into the treehouse. At 9, Lily had grown into her role as the middle child with remarkable grace, serving as both little sister to Emma and Ethan and big sister to baby James when he visited. The family dynamics had evolved naturally, each child finding their place in the constellation they'd created together. "Dad, can you help me hang the bird feeder?" Emma called out, holding up elaborate wooden structure she'd crafted in art class. "I want to put it where we can see it from the kitchen window." Marcus set down his spatula and walked over to help his daughter, still marveling at how naturally the word dad had become part of their vocabulary. The legal adoption had been finalized 8 months earlier, a process that felt more like a celebration than a court proceeding. Emma and Ethan had chosen to take his last name, becoming Emma Chen and Ethan Chen officially, though they'd been his children in every way that mattered long before the paperwork was signed. "Right here?" Marcus asked, holding the feeder against the oak tree. "Perfect," Emma said, then lowered her voice conspirationally. "I designed it specifically for cardinals because they mate for life. I thought it would be nice to have a reminder of family loyalty in our yard." Marcus looked at his daughter, constantly amazed by the depth of her thinking. At 8, Emma had developed into a thoughtful, artistic child who still carried some wariness from her early experiences but had learned to trust in the security of their home. She kept a journal where she wrote stories and drew pictures, many featuring themes of found families and children who discovered they were stronger together than apart. "That's a beautiful idea," Marcus said, hammering the small hook into the tree bark. "I think the cardinals will love it here." Ethan appeared beside them, having climbed down from his treehouse to inspect the bird feeder installation. "Did you know that cardinals can live up to 15 years in the wild?" he said, running his hands over Emma's craftsmanship. And they're one of the few bird species where both parents feed the babies together. How do you know so much about birds? Asked Tommy, the 10-year-old from across the street who'd become Ethan's closest friend. I read about everything, Ethan said matter-of-factly. Dad says curiosity is the best tool for building a good life. Marcus felt a familiar warmth at hearing his words reflected back through his son's perspective. Ethan had blossomed academically since joining their family, his natural intelligence nurtured by stability and encouragement. He'd tested into the gifted program at school and was already talking about engineering college, though Marcus reminded him there was plenty of time to explore different interests. Speaking of reading, Marcus said, didn't you two have something you wanted to share with everyone? Emma and Ethan exchanged excited glances. They'd been working on a secret project for weeks, and today's barbecue was their chosen venue for the big reveal. We wrote a book, Emma announced to the gathered neighbors, about our family and how we all found each other. It's called The House on Maple Street, Ethan added. Emma did the illustrations and I helped with the technical parts, like making sure the timeline was accurate. Mrs. Henderson clapped her hands together. Oh, how wonderful! Will you read it to us? Emma ran into the house and returned with a handmade book, the pages carefully bound and the cover decorated with watercolor paintings of an old Victorian house surrounded by autumn leaves. She cleared her throat and began to read, her voice clear and confident. Once upon a time, there was a house that used to be full of love, but became empty when the family who lived there had to go away. The house waited and waited for someone to fill it with laughter again, but instead of a family. Moving in, the house welcomed two children who needed a place to hide while they figured out how to stay together. Marcus listened, transported back to that October afternoon when he'd first heard scratching sounds from the second floor of the abandoned house. The children's version of their story was both accurate and magical, focusing on themes of perseverance, love, and the way broken things could be made whole again. The children were scared because grown-ups kept trying to separate them, Emma continued. But they promised each other they would never give up, no matter how hard it got. And then one day, a man came to the house who understood that some promises are too important to break. Ethan picked up the narrative for the middle section, describing Marcus's discovery of them and his decision to help. The 8-year-old's version of events was surprisingly sophisticated, touching on concepts of trust, family, and the courage required to open your heart when you've been hurt before. The man could have called the police or the social workers right away, Ethan read. But instead, he asked what we needed and listened to our answer. He brought us food and books and a safe place to sleep. And when we told him we couldn't be separated, he said he understood because he had a daughter he loved more than anything, and he knew what it felt like to want to protect someone. Emma took over for the final section, describing their journey through the foster care system, the court hearings, and ultimately the creation of their new family. Her illustrations showed stick figures growing more detailed and colorful as the story progressed, culminating in a detailed drawing of their current house with 4 smiling faces in the front yard. And they all lived happily ever after, Emma concluded, but not because their problems magically disappeared. They lived happily because they chose to face their problems together as a real family. The end. The gathered neighbors applauded warmly, and Marcus noticed more than a few wiping away tears. Their story had become neighborhood legend, inspiring other families to consider foster care and adoption. Marcus and the children had even spoken at community events, sharing their experience to encourage others who might be hesitant to open their homes to children in need. That was beautiful, said Janet Morrison, who'd become a family friend after their case was closed. You should consider submitting it to publishers. Stories like yours need to be shared more widely. As the barbecue continued into the evening, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. His career at Morrison Engineering had flourished, leading to a promotion and increased responsibilities that he genuinely enjoyed. The financial stability allowed him to provide opportunities for all 3 children that he'd never dreamed possible. Emma was taking art classes at the community center and had already won 2 local contests for her paintings. Ethan was enrolled in a robotics club and spent his weekends building increasingly complex mechanical devices. Lily had joined the school choir and was learning to play piano, her musical talents encouraged by the same philosophy that guided their family. Every person had unique gifts that deserved nurturing. But more than the external successes, Marcus was proud of who his children had become as people. Emma had developed a fierce advocacy for other foster children, volunteering with Sarah to create care packages for kids entering the system. Ethan used his engineering skills to fix broken toys that were donated to local shelters. Lily had inherited her father's protective instincts, becoming the child who befriended newcomers at school and stood up to bullies on the playground. "Dad," Emma said, appearing at his elbow as the last of the neighbors headed home. "Thank you for the party. I think everyone really liked our book." "I think they loved your book because it reminded them that good things can happen when people choose to care about each other," Marcus replied, starting to clean up the yard. Ethan joined them, carrying empty plates from the picnic table. "Mrs. Patterson stopped by while you were talking to Mr. Bradley." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Their former neighbor had moved away 6 months after their court victory, but he was surprised she'd made the effort to visit. "What did she want?" "She wanted to apologize," Emma said. "She said she was wrong about us, and that she's glad we all ended up together. She brought cookies." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions about their former adversary's change of heart. Mrs. Patterson's complaint had nearly destroyed their family, but it had also forced him to fight harder and ultimately led to the job opportunity that changed everything. Sometimes the obstacles that seemed most threatening turned out to be necessary catalysts for growth. "People can change their minds when they take time to really see a situation," Marcus said diplomatically. "I'm glad she took the trouble to visit." As they finished cleaning up and moved inside for the evening routine, Marcus watched his children settle into their homework and bedtime preparations with the comfortable efficiency of a family that had found its rhythm. Emma spread her art supplies across the kitchen table, working on illustrations for another story. Ethan disappeared into the basement workshop to tinker with a new project. Lily curled up in the living room with a book, reading aloud to the family cat they'd adopted from the shelter. "Dad, can we have a family meeting?" Emma asked, looking up from her drawing. Marcus set down the dish towel he'd been using, joined his children in the living room. Family meetings had become a monthly tradition, a time for everyone to share concerns, plan activities, and make decisions together. "What's on your mind?" Marcus asked, settling into his favorite chair. Emma and Ethan exchanged one of their meaningful looks. Then Emma pulled out a carefully folded piece of paper. "We've been thinking about other kids who might be living in abandoned houses or foster homes where they're not happy. We want to do something to help them." Ethan nodded earnestly. "We were thinking maybe we could start a program where families like ours help other kids who need families. Like mentoring or something." Lily looked up from her book. "I could help too. I know what it's like to get new siblings. I could talk to other kids about how great it is." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His children had taken their own experiences and transformed them into compassion for others facing similar challenges. This was exactly the kind of people he'd hoped they would become. "That's a wonderful idea," Marcus said. "What kind of program were you thinking about?" Emma unfolded her paper, revealing a detailed plan written in her careful handwriting. "We could partner with Janet's office to create a support network for foster families. Maybe have picnics like today where foster kids could meet other families and see that adoption really works. And we could make welcome kits," Ethan added, "with books and art supplies and maybe some of my inventions. Things that would help kids feel less scared when they're moving to new places." Marcus listened to his children outline their vision, marveling at their thoughtfulness and ambition. They'd taken their trauma and transformed it into a desire to prevent other children from experiencing the same fear and uncertainty they'd endured. "I think it's a fantastic idea," Marcus said. "Why don't we call Janet tomorrow and see how we can make it happen?" Over the following months, the Chen family became advocates and mentors within the local foster care community. Their Maple Street project, named after the house where Marcus had first found Emma and Ethan, created support networks for foster families and children. They organized monthly gatherings, created resource guides, and provided practical assistance to families navigating the adoption process. Emma's artistic talents were channeled into creating coloring books and activity packets for children entering foster care. Ethan designed and built comfort items like nightlights and music boxes. Lily became the official greeter at their events, using her natural warmth to help nervous children feel welcome. Marcus found himself serving on advisory committees and speaking at conferences about foster care and adoption. His engineering background proved valuable in helping the system run more efficiently, while his personal experience provided credibility and insight that purely professional perspectives couldn't match. 1 year after starting the Maple Street project, Marcus received a call that brought their journey full circle. A social worker in the next county had found 3 siblings living in an abandoned warehouse, and the local department was struggling to find a placement that would keep them together. "We've heard about your family's story," the social worker explained, "and we were wondering if you might consider expanding your family again." Marcus looked around his house, calculating space and resources and emotional capacity. The new position Morrison Engineering had offered him would require some travel, but the salary increase would easily support additional children. More importantly, he thought about Emma and Ethan's passion for helping other kids in similar situations. "Tell me about them," Marcus said, already knowing what his answer would be. When he presented the opportunity to his children that evening, their response was immediate and unanimous. "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "They need what we needed. They need someone who won't give up on keeping them together." "Can we go meet them?" Ethan asked. "I want to show them that it's possible to find a real family." Lily bounced with excitement. "I'll be the big sister to someone. This is the best news ever." 3 months later, Marcus stood in another courthouse, this time with Emma, Ethan, and Lily beside him as they welcomed Sophia, Miguel, and baby Aina into their family. The Chen household had grown from 2 to 6 children, ranging in age from infant to 10 years old, each bringing their own history and needs and gifts. The house that had once felt spacious now buzzed with constant activity. The backyard that had hosted neighborhood barbecues was transformed into a playground and outdoor classroom. Marcus's basement workshop became a collaborative space where all the children worked on projects together, combining Emma's artistic vision with Ethan's engineering skills and the younger children's fresh perspectives. "Are you sure you're not overwhelmed?" Sarah asked during one of her visits, watching Marcus coordinate homework time for 5 school-aged children while bottle-feeding baby Aina. Marcus looked around the cheerful chaos of his dining room, where Emma was helping Sophia with a book report while Ethan explained fractions to Miguel and Lily, read to the toddler they'd adopted the year before. The scene was loud and messy and wonderful. "I'm not overwhelmed," Marcus said, shifting Aina to his shoulder for burping. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That evening, as Marcus made his rounds for bedtime stories and tucking in, he stopped in the hallway to look at the wall of family photos that documented their journey. There was the first picture of Emma and Ethan in their new house, looking stunned but hopeful. Photos from Lily's first meeting with her new siblings, all 3 children grinning at the camera. Court day pictures, birthday celebrations, first days of school, and holiday gatherings. The most recent addition was a professional family portrait, taken for the Maple Street Project's annual report. All 6 children were arranged around Marcus, each face showing the confidence that came from knowing they were chosen and loved and permanent. Emma held baby Anna while Ethan stood proudly beside his father. Lily had her arms around Sophia and Miguel, officially the middle children, but naturally taking on protective big sister roles. "Dad?" Emma appeared in the hallway, already in her pajamas. "Are you okay?" Marcus smiled at his oldest daughter, this remarkable young woman who taught him that love could multiply infinitely without diminishing. "I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about how lucky we all are." Emma nodded seriously. "Ethan and I were talking about that today. We figured out that if you hadn't come to that house when you did, none of this would have happened. Not just our family, but all the other kids we've helped through the Maple Street project too. It's like ripples in a pond," Marcus said. "One small act of kindness spreads out in ways you never expect." "That's what we're going to write about in our next book," Emma said. "About how helping one person can end up helping hundreds of people, even if you don't know it at the time." As Marcus finished his bedtime rounds and settled into his own room, he thought about the abandoned house on Maple Street that had been demolished years ago. In its place stood a small park with playground equipment and benches, a place where families gathered and children played safely. But the real monument to that house wasn't the park. It was the family that had grown from the seeds planted on that October afternoon when two frightened children chose to trust a stranger who offered them safety. It was the dozens of other families who'd been inspired to open their homes to children in need. It was the network of support and advocacy that had grown from their shared experience of choosing love over fear. Marcus Chen had walked into an abandoned house looking for structural damage and walked out with the blueprint for the rest of his life. He'd learned that family wasn't about perfection or resources or meeting bureaucratic requirements. Family was about showing up day after day and choosing to fight for each other no matter what obstacles appeared. As he drifted off to sleep, in a house filled with the quiet sounds of his 6 children breathing safely in their beds, Marcus smiled at the memory of Emma's question from that first day. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know us." Now he could answer that question with the wisdom that came from living the answer every day. He did it because love multiplied when it was shared. He did it because every child deserved to know they mattered. He did it because sometimes the most important thing you could do was simply refuse to give up on someone who needed you. The house on Maple Street was gone, but the family it had created would last forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.